The holographic contract materialized in the depths of the Obsidian Syndicate's central chamber, its emerald light casting long shadows across the faces of the galaxy's most feared operatives. Silence hung heavy as the contract details unfurled, revealing a single target that would challenge everything they knew about elimination protocols. Emily Morgan, senior researcher at the Hawking Deep Space Station, a name that should have been unremarkable, easily crossed off any list. Yet the bounty attached to her elimination spoke volumes about her unexpected significance. Krell, the Syndicate's most decorated operative, studied the holographic profile with eyes that had scanned thousands of potential marks. Genetically enhanced vision picked apart every pixel of information, searching for weakness. What he saw defied conventional understanding. Morgan appeared disappointingly ordinary. Mid-40s, average height, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her personnel file showed a career of methodical research in xenobiological adaptation systems. Nothing suggested the astronomical bounty placed on her head. 200 million galactic credits, muttered Zora, Krell's tactical partner, her reptilian scales shifting with a mix of excitement and suspicion. For a human researcher, something doesn't add up. Krell's neural implants began parsing background data. Morgan's research history read like a seemingly mundane academic journey. Multiple publications on adaptive biological systems, grants from various interstellar research foundations, recommendations from peer review boards across multiple species academic networks. But the contract came from the highest levels of the Galactic corporate consortium. Not a typical assassination request, but a meticulously crafted elimination order with multiple fail-safe protocols. Something was different about this target. The Syndicate's preliminary intelligence suggested Morgan was far more complex than her personnel file implied. Between the lines of her academic papers, Krell detected something unsettling. Her research wasn't just academic. It was revolutionary. Papers on predictive biological adaptation, theoretical frameworks about systemic threat response, mathematical models that seemed to predict behavioral patterns with impossible accuracy. Each publication was a breadcrumb leading to something far more significant. Standard elimination protocol won't work here, Krell announced, his voice a low metallic rumble that reverberated through the chamber. Other operatives looked up, their various biological augmentations gleaming under the contract's holographic light. His neural network began compiling a comprehensive threat assessment. Morgan's research stations were located in some of the most secure sectors of human-controlled space. The Hawking Deep Space Station orbited a neutron star, its position making traditional approach vectors nearly impossible. Zara leaned closer, her forked tongue flickering with curiosity. What makes this target so special? Humans are typically the easiest marks in the galaxy. Krell's augmented eyes narrowed. The contract specified total elimination, not just physical termination, but complete erasure of all research, all digital and physical traces. The level of comprehensive removal suggested something far beyond a standard corporate silencing. Morgan's most recent research paper caught his attention, a theoretical framework about predictive survival mechanisms that seemed to transcend traditional understanding of biological adaptation. Most would dismiss it as academic speculation, but Krell recognized something deeper. The paper suggested that survival could be engineered, not just through physical adaptation, but through complex predictive systems that could anticipate and neutralize threats before they fully materialized. If the theory was correct, it would revolutionize everything known about survival strategies across multiple species. This is more than an assassination, Krell said slowly, his augmented brain processing multiple scenarios simultaneously. This is a targeted elimination of a potential systemic threat. The contract's details continued to unfold. Multiple fail-safe protocols, redundant elimination vectors, compensation for complete mission success that suggested the stakes were astronomically high. Whatever Morgan had discovered, someone wanted it buried permanently. Krell interfaced with the Syndicate's mission preparation systems. Holographic tactical displays began populating with initial approach scenarios. Each projection failed within microseconds of initialization. Something about the target made traditional elimination strategies collapse before they could even fully form. For the first time in his enhanced career, Krell felt a hint of genuine uncertainty. This mission would be different. This target was not like the others. Emily Morgan was about to become the most challenging mark in the history of the Obsidian Syndicate. The Hawking Deep Space Station existed in a realm between mathematical precision and quantum chaos. From the outside, it appeared as a simple research outpost orbiting a violent neutron star. Inside, Emily Morgan's workspace was a living, breathing ecosystem of predictive technology that defied conventional understanding. Holographic displays danced with probability matrices, each projection a complex web of potential outcomes continuously recalculating in real time. What looked like scientific equipment to an untrained eye was actually the most sophisticated threat prediction system ever conceived. Morgan moved through her laboratory with the deliberate grace of a systems architect. Her fingers traced holographic interfaces that seemed to anticipate her thoughts before she could fully form them. Each piece of equipment was more than a tool. It was a node in an impossibly complex defensive network. The core of her research lay in a breakthrough that had consumed the past decade of her life: predictive adaptive response systems. Traditional defense mechanisms relied on reaction. Morgan's work suggested something revolutionary: the ability to predict and neutralize threats before they could even conceptualize an attack. A quantum computer hummed nearby, its processing power beyond anything in known space. Biological simulation chambers lined the walls, each containing carefully cultivated adaptive systems that seemed to breathe with an almost living intelligence. Quantum entanglement sensors picked up minute variations in probability fields, translating potential threats into actionable intelligence. Dr. Marcus Chen, Morgan's primary research assistant, watched in quiet amazement. He had worked alongside her for years, yet he still couldn't fully comprehend the depth of her work. The latest simulation shows a 99.8% probability mapping of potential threat vectors, Morgan said, her voice calm and measured. A holographic display erupted around her, showing thousands of potential scenarios playing out simultaneously. Each scenario represented a potential assassination attempt. Approach vectors, environmental variables, psychological profiling. Every possible method of elimination was not just anticipated but systematically neutralized before it could fully form. The research had begun as a theoretical exploration of survival mechanisms. How could biological systems predict and counter threats at a fundamental level? What if survival could be engineered not through physical adaptation, but through predictive intelligence? Morgan's work drew from multiple disciplines: quantum mechanics, biological systems theory, advanced machine learning, psychological profiling. Each field contributed a piece to an impossibly complex puzzle. The neutron star outside provided more than just a defensive position. Its extreme gravitational environment created unique quantum fluctuations that Morgan had learned to harness. Probability itself became a defensive mechanism. The system is picking up multiple potential approach vectors, Chen said, studying the secondary display. But each one is being systematically blocked before it can fully develop. Morgan nodded. Her latest research suggested that threats could be neutralized at the quantum information level. Before an assassin could even form a complete plan, the probability of that plan's success would collapse. A notification flashed across her primary display: incoming data from external monitoring systems. Subtle variations in long-range scanning patterns. Most would ignore such minute details, but for Morgan, these were early warning signs. Someone was watching, gathering intelligence. The defensive systems began to shift, creating multiple layers of probabilistic interference. If someone were attempting reconnaissance, they would find nothing but mathematical noise. Potential observation points would become statistical impossibilities. Prepare the quantum interference protocols, Morgan instructed Chen. Her voice carried a note of calm determination. This was more than research. This was survival engineered to a scientific art form. The laboratory continued its silent dance of probabilities. Holographic displays shifted and changed, creating a living map of potential threats that were constantly being predicted, analyzed, and neutralized. Outside the station, the neutron star continued its violent rotation. Gravitational waves rippled through space, creating a natural defensive barrier that complemented Morgan's technological systems. What the Obsidian Syndicate didn't understand was that Emily Morgan wasn't just preparing for a potential threat. She was systematically redesigning the very concept of survival. Each moment was a calculated response, each system a potential defensive mechanism. The entire research station had become something more than a simple scientific outpost. It was a living, breathing defensive organism. And it was ready. The assassination attempt was supposed to be clinical, a perfectly calculated shot that would end Emily Morgan's life with mathematical precision. Krell positioned himself with surgical accuracy in the maintenance corridor of the Hawking Deep Space Station. His targeting systems represented the pinnacle of genetic engineering and technological augmentation. Calibrated to account for gravitational drift, particle interference, and quantum uncertainties, these systems had eliminated targets across 3 galactic sectors with unparalleled efficiency. The corridor stretched before him like a calculated vector of death. His neural implants interfaced with the station's maintenance systems, creating a ghost pathway that should have been undetectable. Stealth systems engage, rendering him invisible to traditional scanning methods. Molecular camouflage broke down his outline, merging him with the station's metallic infrastructure. The shot would take precisely 2.73 seconds from trigger pull to target elimination. But something was wrong. The first indication came milliseconds before the shot. A maintenance drone unexpectedly shifted its position. Not by design, not by programming. It moved with an improbability that defied all predictive models. Krell's finger tensed on the trigger. The projectile launched, a hypersonic round designed to penetrate multiple layers of advanced station shielding. It should have been impossible to dodge, mathematically certain of success. But mathematics, in this moment, became a lie. The drone's unexpected movement caused a cascading series of system failures. Maintenance protocols triggered emergency shutdown sequences. Magnetic containment fields fluctuated. Emergency bulkheads began to seal. Krell's perfectly calculated shot missed by a microscopic margin. Instead of eliminating the target, the projectile triggered a catastrophic chain reaction. Maintenance systems went into full lockdown. Entire sections of the research station began to seal themselves off, creating an impenetrable maze of security protocols. What should have been a moment of triumph became a complete operational failure. In the control center, Emily Morgan didn't even look surprised. Dr. Marcus Chen watched the system logs with a mixture of fascination and professional respect. The predictive interference worked perfectly. He muttered, more to himself than to Morgan. The maintenance drone that had seemingly accidentally moved was nothing of the sort. It was a carefully engineered probability manipulation device, part of Morgan's complex defensive network that transformed the entire station into a living, breathing defensive organism. Krell's neural implants began processing the failure. Tactical assessment algorithms ran multiple scenario reconstructions, each one collapsing under the weight of statistical improbability. How could a simple maintenance drone derail a perfectly calculated assassination attempt? The answer lay in Morgan's research. Predictive systems that didn't just defend. They actively manipulated probability itself. The drone wasn't just a piece of equipment. It was a mathematical weapon designed to create uncertainty. Zara, monitoring the mission remotely, felt a chill run down her scaled spine. "That's impossible," she whispered, watching the mission logs. But impossible was becoming a matter of perspective. The station's defensive systems continued their silent work. Probability fields shifted. Potential threat vectors collapsed before they could fully form. What looked like random chance was actually a meticulously engineered survival mechanism. Krell realized something fundamental had changed. This was more than an assassination attempt. This was a fundamental challenge to everything he understood about elimination protocols. The target wasn't just defending. She was actively reshaping the very nature of conflict. In the research laboratory, Morgan continued her work. The failed assassination attempt was just another data point in her ongoing research, another opportunity to refine her predictive systems. The maintenance drone returned to its original position, its momentary dance of improbability complete. Outside the station, the neutron star continued its violent rotation. Gravitational waves rippled through space, a natural defensive mechanism that complemented Morgan's technological systems. The Obsidian Syndicate would soon learn a crucial lesson. Emily Morgan was not a target to be eliminated. She was a system designed to survive. The Obsidian Syndicate responded with escalation. If traditional methods failed, they would deploy their most specialized operatives. Each assassin was a carefully engineered weapon, selected for their ability to eliminate targets that defied conventional elimination protocols. The first was Vex, a neural-augmented operative whose psychological warfare techniques had broken entire planetary resistance movements. His approach was surgical, targeting not just the physical body, but the mental landscape of his mark. What Vex didn't understand was that Emily Morgan had already begun dismantling him before he could even initiate his first move. The psychological profile arrived in encrypted syndicate channels. Height: 1.92 meters. Genetic modifications: advanced neural plasticity. Specialization: psychological destabilization. 37 confirmed eliminations across multiple star systems. Morgan studied the file with clinical detachment. Her first countermove began subtly. Anonymous communications started appearing in secure channels that Vex considered impenetrable. Fragments of information. Precise psychological triggers that seemed to emerge from nowhere. A communication log from a past mission. An encrypted fragment of a psychological evaluation. A microscopic detail that should have been impossible to retrieve. Vex's neural implants began to react. Threat assessment algorithms started generating anomalous responses. Something was interfering with his carefully constructed mental defenses. The communications were designed with mathematical precision. Each fragment was a carefully constructed psychological weapon, targeting the specific neural pathways of an enhanced assassin. They didn't just communicate information. They were designed to create cognitive dissonance. Dr. Marcus Chen watched the psychological warfare unfold with professional fascination. "The targeting is incredible," he muttered, studying the complex algorithms Morgan had developed. Vex's mission control began receiving conflicting data streams. Mission parameters became increasingly unstable. His neural augmentations, designed to provide perfect tactical assessment, started generating multiple contradictory threat scenarios. Most targets would break under such psychological pressure. They would become paralyzed by uncertainty. But Morgan wasn't most targets. The second operative, a shape-shifting biomechanical assassin named Kara, found her stealth systems completely compromised. Infiltration protocols that had worked on hundreds of targets suddenly became transparent. Every potential approach vector was not just blocked but exposed. It was as if Morgan could see through the very fabric of tactical deception. The Syndicate's most advanced operatives were being systematically neutralized without a single direct confrontation. Their own augmentations were being turned against them, creating a feedback loop of psychological instability. Vex's neural implants began to malfunction. Memories from past missions started bleeding into his current operational parameters. Psychological barriers designed to prevent emotional contamination began to collapse. He realized, with growing terror, that he was no longer in control of his own mental landscape. Morgan wasn't just defending. She was actively deconstructing the psychological infrastructure of the most advanced assassination network in the galaxy. Each operative sent became another data point in her research, another opportunity to refine her understanding of adaptive psychological defense mechanisms. The Obsidian Syndicate's reputation began to crumble. Operatives who had been considered invincible started reporting unexpected mental instabilities. Mission success rates plummeted. What was happening defied conventional understanding. In her research laboratory, Morgan continued her work. The failed assassination attempts were not just threats to be neutralized. They were opportunities for scientific exploration. Dr. Chen watched as she compiled the psychological data from each attempted elimination. "They're sending their best," he observed. Morgan's response was calm. "And each attempt provides more information about adaptive survival mechanisms." The psychological warfare continued, but it was becoming increasingly clear that the targets were no longer the humans. The hunters had become the studied. Outside the research station, the neutron star continued its violent rotation. Gravitational waves rippled through space, a natural defensive mechanism that perfectly complemented Morgan's technological systems. The galaxy was learning a crucial lesson. Humans were not just another species to be eliminated. They were the ultimate system designers of survival. The breakthrough came during a seemingly ordinary research presentation at the Galactic Scientific Consortium's annual conference. Emily Morgan stood before an audience of the most brilliant minds from across known space, her presentation promising to revolutionize understanding of survival itself. What appeared to be a standard academic lecture was actually a calculated reveal of her life's most groundbreaking work. The holographic display behind her showcased complex mathematical models that seemed to breathe with living intelligence. Probability matrices danced, showing how threat prediction could be transformed from a reactive process to a predictive, almost prescient methodology. Dr. Marcus Chen watched from the sidelines, knowing this moment would change everything. "Survival is not about resistance," Morgan began, her voice calm and measured. "It's about comprehensive adaptive response. Traditional defense mechanisms operate on a fundamental misunderstanding of threat dynamics." The audience, composed of researchers from multiple species, listened with increasing fascination. Holographic projections illustrated her points, complex systems that could predict and neutralize threats before they could fully conceptualize an attack. Her research went beyond biological adaptation. She had developed a comprehensive framework for understanding survival as a mathematical and psychological system. Threat vectors could be mathematically mapped, predicted, and ultimately dissolved before they became tangible. The implications were staggering. For the Obsidian Syndicate, monitoring the presentation through covered channels, the revelation was terrifying. Morgan was not just defending herself. She was creating a comprehensive system that could potentially render entire assassination networks obsolete. The research suggested that survival could be engineered at a fundamental level, not through physical augmentation or technological defense, but through a deep understanding of probabilistic systems and psychological manipulation. Each slide revealed another layer of her groundbreaking work. Quantum uncertainty became a defensive mechanism. Psychological profiles could be transformed into predictive shields. The very concept of a target could be systematically deconstructed. Krell, watching the presentation remotely, felt a growing sense of professional terror. This was more than a research paper. This was a fundamental challenge to everything the Obsidian Syndicate understood about elimination protocols. Morgan demonstrated how her systems could create probabilistic interference fields. Potential threat vectors would collapse before they could fully form. An assassination attempt would become mathematically impossible before it could be conceived. The scientific community was witnessing the birth of a new paradigm of survival. "We've been approaching defense from the wrong perspective," Morgan explained. "Most systems focus on blocking or resisting threats. My research shows that true survival is about creating an environment where threats cannot exist." Dr. Chen activated a demonstration. A series of complex simulations showed how Morgan's adaptive response systems could neutralize multiple simultaneous threat scenarios. Each potential attack vector was not just blocked but systematically dissolved. The neutron star outside the conference hall seemed to pulse in sympathy with the revolutionary ideas being presented. Gravitational waves rippled through space, a natural defensive mechanism that perfectly complemented Morgan's technological insights. Representatives from multiple interstellar security networks watched with increasing interest. This was more than an academic presentation. This was a fundamental reimagining of conflict resolution. Morgan's work suggested that survival was not about strength, but about comprehensive understanding. By mapping psychological, quantum, and probabilistic systems, threats could be neutralized at their most fundamental level. The Obsidian Syndicate realized they were no longer hunting a target. They had become subjects of the most comprehensive threat analysis in galactic history. As the presentation concluded, the implications became clear. Morgan had not just developed a defensive system. She had created a comprehensive framework for understanding survival itself. The galaxy was about to change. Dr. Chen approached Morgan after the presentation, a look of professional admiration on his face. "They'll never see this coming," he said quietly. Morgan's response was calm. "They're already obsolete. They just don't know it yet." Outside, the violent rotation of the neutron star continued, a perfect metaphor for the revolutionary ideas that had just been unleashed upon the scientific community. The collapse of the Obsidian Syndicate began not with a violent confrontation, but with a quiet dissemination of knowledge. Emily Morgan's research spread through scientific networks like a quantum infection, fundamentally rewriting the understanding of survival and threat prevention across multiple species. Research stations began implementing her adaptive response protocols. Interstellar security networks studied her mathematical models with increasing fascination. What had once seemed like theoretical speculation was rapidly becoming the most advanced defensive technology in known space. The Syndicate's reputation started to crumble from within. Operatives who had once been considered invincible found their neural augmentations becoming increasingly vulnerable. Mission success rates plummeted. Contracts that would have been considered guaranteed began to fail with increasing frequency. Krell watched the systematic destruction of everything he had known with a mixture of professional terror and grudging respect. The first major breakdown came when a high-profile elimination contract failed spectacularly, not through direct intervention, but through a complex series of probabilistic interferences that made the mission mathematically impossible. An operative found every approach vector dissolved before it could be fully conceived. Communications networks began to light up with reports of similar failures. An assassination attempt on a planetary governor became a statistical impossibility. A targeted elimination in a deep space research facility collapsed before it could begin. Entire networks of covert operatives found themselves systematically neutralized without a single direct confrontation. Morgan's research had transformed threat prevention from a reactive process to a predictive science. The Galactic corporate consortium began to take notice. Security networks that had relied on traditional elimination protocols found themselves rapidly becoming obsolete. The very concept of a guaranteed elimination was being mathematically dismantled. Dr. Marcus Chen continued to work alongside Morgan, documenting the systematic deconstruction of existing threat management systems. Each failed attempt became another data point in their comprehensive research. "It's not just about defense," Chen observed during one of their research sessions. "We're fundamentally redesigning the concept of survival itself." Morgan's adaptive response protocols began to be adopted by multiple research institutions. What had started as a theoretical framework was rapidly becoming the new standard for threat prevention. The Syndicate's leadership realized they were facing more than just a series of failed missions. They were witnessing the complete obsolescence of their entire operational model. Zara, Krell's former tactical partner, discovered that her neural augmentations were becoming increasingly compromised. Threat assessment algorithms that had once been considered infallible now generated nothing but statistical noise. The breakdown was systematic and comprehensive. Interstellar security networks began to restructure themselves around Morgan's research. Defensive technologies that had been considered cutting-edge became instantly outdated. The very concept of an untouchable target was being mathematically dismantled. Morgan wasn't just defending herself. She was systematically redesigning the entire concept of survival. The neutron star outside her research station continued its violent rotation, a perfect metaphor for the revolutionary changes being unleashed across known space. Gravitational waves rippled through the cosmos, creating natural defensive patterns that seemed to echo her mathematical models. Krell received the final communication from Syndicate leadership. The message was brief and devastating. The Obsidian Syndicate was being disbanded. Decades of operational history, hundreds of specialized operatives, an entire network built on the premise of guaranteed elimination, all collapsed by a single human researcher's groundbreaking work. In her laboratory, Morgan continued her research. Each failed assassination attempt, each compromised operational network. They were all simply data points in her comprehensive study of adaptive survival mechanisms. They never understood, she said quietly to Chen. Survival isn't about resistance. It's about comprehensive understanding. The galaxy was learning a crucial lesson. Humans were not just another species to be eliminated or controlled. They were the ultimate system designers of survival. Outside, the violent dance of the neutron star continued, a cosmic metaphor for the revolutionary ideas that were transforming known space. Krell made his final, desperate attempt. This was more than a mission. This was a last stand for everything the Obsidian Syndicate had ever represented. The approach was meticulously planned. Every possible variable had been calculated. Multiple backup strategies, redundant elimination vectors, genetic augmentations pushed beyond their known limits. If anyone could succeed where others had failed, it would be Krell. But Emily Morgan had been preparing for this moment her entire career. The research station hung in space near the neutron star, its defensive systems a complex lattice of probabilistic interference. What appeared to be a simple scientific outpost was actually the most sophisticated survival mechanism ever conceived. Krell's neural implants began interfacing with the station's external systems. Normally, this would provide a tactical advantage. Here, it became a fatal mistake. Each attempted connection created a cascade of statistical improbabilities. Tactical assessment algorithms began generating multiple contradictory scenarios. Threat vectors collapsed before they could fully form. The very act of attempting to gather intelligence became a form of elimination. Dr. Marcus Chen monitored the confrontation from the research station's primary control center. "She's not just defending," he muttered. "She's studying." Morgan stood at the center of a holographic display that mapped potential conflict scenarios in real time. Each of Krell's potential approaches was not just blocked but transformed into a complex data point for her ongoing research. The confrontation became a multi-dimensional chess match of predictive modeling, psychological manipulation, and technological countermeasures. Krell's genetic modifications began to work against him. Neural pathways designed for tactical assessments started generating increasing levels of cognitive dissonance. His most advanced augmentations became his greatest vulnerability. Stealth systems that should have rendered him invisible created statistical anomalies that immediately flagged his position. Molecular camouflage broke down under the weight of Morgan's probabilistic interference fields. Every move Krell planned was already anticipated. The station's defensive systems were not just technological. They were a living, breathing adaptive organism. Maintenance drones moved with impossible precision. Gravitational sensors created interference patterns that dissolved approach vectors. Morgan's research had transformed the entire station into a comprehensive survival mechanism. Krell realized, with growing terror, that he was no longer hunting a target. He had become a subject of the most comprehensive threat analysis in galactic history. Holographic displays tracked his every potential movement. Quantum uncertainty became a defensive weapon. Psychological profiles were transformed into predictive shields. The very concept of a target was being systematically deconstructed. "Elimination is impossible," Morgan said calmly, more to herself than to Krell. "Survival is about comprehensive understanding." The neutron star outside seemed to pulse in sympathy with the confrontation. Gravitational waves created natural defensive patterns that perfectly complemented Morgan's technological systems. Chen watched in professional amazement as Krell's most advanced elimination strategies collapsed one by one. Each failed approach became another data point in Morgan's research. Krell's neural implants began to malfunction. Memories from past missions started bleeding into his current operational parameters. Psychological barriers designed to prevent emotional contamination began to collapse. He was no longer in control. The final moment came not with violence, but with a complete systemic breakdown. Krell found himself unable to complete a single tactical assessment. His most advanced augmentations had become his ultimate weakness. Morgan didn't need to lift a finger. The station's defensive systems had already neutralized the threat before it could fully materialize. "Fascinating," she said quietly, studying the complex data streams generated by the confrontation. Outside, the violent rotation of the neutron star continued, a perfect metaphor for the revolutionary ideas that had just been demonstrated. Krell realized the fundamental truth that the Obsidian Syndicate had never understood. Humans were not just another species to be eliminated. They were the ultimate system designers of survival. The aftermath of Emily Morgan's confrontation with the Obsidian Syndicate reverberated through multiple star systems. What had begun as a personal defense mechanism became a fundamental revolution in how survival was understood across known space. Academic conferences became battlegrounds of intellectual transformation. Morgan's research papers were dissected, studied, and ultimately celebrated as a breakthrough that would reshape entire fields of study. The Galactic Scientific Consortium convened a special symposium dedicated to her work. Researchers from multiple species gathered to understand the comprehensive survival mechanisms she had developed. Dr. Marcus Chen presented the fundamental insights of their research. "Survival is not about resistance," he explained to the assembled scientists. "It's about comprehensive adaptive response. We've been approaching defense from the entirely wrong perspective." Holographic displays showed the complex mathematical models that had systematically dismantled the most advanced assassination network in known space. Each projection revealed layers of probabilistic interference that transformed threat prevention from a reactive process to a predictive science. The implications were staggering. Interstellar security networks began rapid reconstruction. Defensive technologies that had been considered cutting-edge became instantly obsolete. Entire branches of military and protection strategies were fundamentally reimagined. Morgan's work suggested that survival could be engineered at a fundamental level, not through physical augmentation or technological defense, but through a deep understanding of probabilistic systems and psychological manipulation. The Obsidian Syndicate's complete collapse became a case study in systemic vulnerability. An organization that had operated with impunity for generations was systematically dismantled by a single human researcher's groundbreaking work. Krell, the Syndicate's most advanced operative, became a subject of intense scientific study. His neural augmentations, once considered the pinnacle of genetic engineering, were now viewed as fundamentally flawed. Morgan's research had revealed the inherent weaknesses in traditional threat management approaches. Academic institutions began developing new courses based on her comprehensive survival frameworks. What had once been theoretical speculation became the new standard for understanding adaptive response systems. The neutron star that had witnessed the entire conflict continued its violent rotation outside the research station. Gravitational waves rippled through space, a natural defensive mechanism that seemed to echo the mathematical models Morgan had developed. International research grants flooded in. Morgan found herself at the center of a scientific revolution that extended far beyond her original research objectives. "We're not just changing how we defend," Morgan explained during a keynote address. "We're fundamentally redesigning our understanding of survival itself." Her work suggested that true defense was about creating an environment where threats could not exist. By mapping psychological, quantum, and probabilistic systems, potential conflicts could be neutralized at their most fundamental level. The galactic community began to see humans differently. No longer were they viewed as a young, potentially volatile species. They were recognized as system designers, individuals capable of reimagining fundamental concepts of survival and conflict resolution. Dr. Chen continued to document the broader implications of their research. Each failed assassination attempt, each compromised operational network. They were all simply data points in a comprehensive study of adaptive survival mechanisms. Governmental bodies began restructuring their approach to security. Diplomatic protocols were rewritten. Conflict resolution strategies were fundamentally transformed. The legacy extended beyond immediate scientific applications. Morgan's research suggested a more comprehensive approach to understanding complex systems. Her work became a blueprint for addressing challenges in fields ranging from ecological preservation to interspecies communication. Krell, stripped of his augmentations and professional identity, became a subject of intense psychological study. His experiences became another data point in understanding the limitations of traditional threat management approaches. The symposium's final report was unequivocal. Morgan's research represented a paradigm shift in understanding survival, defense, and adaptive response systems. Humans are not just another species, the report concluded. They are the ultimate system designers of survival. Outside the conference hall, the violent dance of the neutron star continued, a cosmic metaphor for the revolutionary ideas that were transforming known space. Emily Morgan had done more than survive. She had fundamentally reimagined the very concept of survival itself. The galaxy would never be the same.